Welcome back to Small Caps, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kerry Stevenson, and today I am speaking with Todd Williams. He's Managing Director of E2 Metals. The ASX code is E2M. Really easy. Now, lots of news coming out of E2M. It's been a little while since Todd and I have spoken, so sit up and take some notice because the market is starting to get excited about what they're doing. Todd, welcome back to Small Caps. Great to see you.
How you going, Kerry? Thanks for having me.
Well, before we get into what I think is some pretty exciting news for E2M, it's been a little while since we've spoken. Give us a brief overview of who you are, where you're located, what you're up to at the moment. Then I want to get into the news out this week.
Yeah, sure. So E2 Metals is a silver gold exploration company listed on the ASX under the ticker E2M. We're focused on the Santa Cruz province of Argentina, and we're there because there's lots of big mines in Argentina, or specifically in Santa Cruz. We're about 25 kilometres from Anglo Gold's Cerro Vanguardia mine, which has produced about 9 million ounces of gold and 137 million ounces of silver.
Right area to be in. Now, the reason I wanted to chat with you today is you have just done it's a transformational transaction with Austral. Austral Gold. Their ASX code is AGD. I want to unpack that. I want to find the reasons behind that. Talk to us about the transaction, and then we'll go into a bit more detail as well.
Yeah, sure. So maybe we'll just go through the context and the background leading up to the transaction, and really, I guess, the sort of the early days of E2 Metals, we've really been an exploration company, an early stage exploration company. So we went out into a new area. We're a greenfields explorer. We devised a concept around the fertility of the Conserrat project. So we went out to an area that no one's explored before. And in 2020, we made a high-grade discovery at the Mir prospect, which was a blind discovery at that point in time, meaning it doesn't have a surface expression. So it's basically a blind discovery. Then in February this year, we actually made another high-grade discovery at a prospect called Malvina, which some of the results that come out of there was sort of 14 meters at sort of just over 2.5 kilos silver, or 3.5 kilos silver equivalent when you include the gold. And so that really put us on the map in terms of being a high-grade silver gold discovery play on the ASX. That caught the attention of renowned precious metal investor Eric Sprott. He came in and cornerstoned a placement in March, and we raised just over $8 million. So that put us in a really strong financial position. And then I'm sure, as the gold lady, you would know that the ensuing months from April through to May, through to June, July were really tough for precious metal explorers in the precious metal industry. And, I guess really the context is that we saw two trends. The first trend was that we saw sort of rising input costs. So we saw the costs of just operating, drilling was going up, and we saw falling asset valuations. So, put simply, the valuations of companies that hold gold resources were falling, and in some cases precipitously, as the Federal Reserve was putting up rates. There was almost a perfect negative correlation between rates going up and the value of gold companies going down. So really what that meant is, we took a step back, we took a strategic pause, and we said, look, our vision is to become a preeminent silver and gold development company on the ASX. That's our vision. How we get there, we're willing to be flexible around how we get there. And so we saw an opportunity with our strong balance sheet, which, obviously we just topped up through the raising with Eric. We saw the opportunity to make our dollars stretch further by looking at strategic acquisitions versus actually drilling our own projects. And so the beautiful thing about the Conserrat project is it's in a very healthy mining ecosystem. You've got the Cerro Vanguardia mine to the east, but you've also got a project to the north called Pinguino. Now, the Pinguino project was held by Austral Gold. It's been held by them since 2016. And importantly, it's been a non-core asset in that company since 2016. And so we approached Austral and I guess put to them the idea of a sort of, let's call it hybrid trade sale versus amalgamation, whereby we actually bring Pinguino into our asset and we combine the two projects under one entity, which makes really imminent sense given the geographical synergies, the geological synergies, the fact that we're only 15 kilometres apart and we're operating in that area. And so, look, long story short, it was, quite a long consummation period, but, we got there. The terms of the transaction are, we've made we will be making a cash payment of $2.5 million US on closing of the transaction, which we hope is sort of late January next year. Austral will emerge as one of the largest shareholders in E2 Metals with just under 20% or circa 49.7 million shares to be exact. And we're also making deferred payments in 3 tranches over 3 years, totaling $2.5 million US. So that's they are the headline terms, but the key metric that matters is that essentially we've acquired a 50 million ounce silver equivalent resource. That includes a really nice high grade 30 million ounce silver equivalent resource at 200 grams, all open pittable, all oxide, shallow, silver, gold mineralization. So very simple, low cost material to process. And really importantly, what we like about the transaction is that, we've essentially doubled the scale of our project for 20% dilution, and we've brought on 50 million ounces of silver at a cost of 20 cents per ounce. So when you look at that compared to our peers, a lot of our peers trade around $1 to $2 up to $3 per ounce. We think that's really the heart of the opportunity here, is that you've got 2 projects that are trading at a low multiple per ounce in the ground. The combination of those 2 projects gives people transparency around tons, transparency around grade, and a clear pathway to development. And that's what's going to re-rate the stock so that E2 now enjoys the sort of multiples that our peers do as well.
Just going back to this deal with Austral Gold, do they have other projects? And were they sort of, this one was the unloved child? And what I'm trying to work out here is why they've done the deal. If the project was so good, why have they let it go?
Yeah, so Austral are a very busy company. They've got operations in Chile. They've got operations in northwestern Argentina. They've got interests in Nevada. And, they've got a mining DNA. So, they're very much operators. And,
Right.
They've been focused on their existing operations, and that's where they extract the most value. That's where they generate their revenue. And so really Pinguino has always been a non-core asset. They don't have a team in Santa Cruz. They haven't done any work since it was acquired 100%. Well, no significant work, no drilling. Essentially, in short, it was, the sort of 4th tier of their portfolio, and it was very much non-core. And I think the belief between both parties is that the best way for them to extract value for their asset is through exposure to the combined portfolio, exposure to Pinguino and Conserrat being operated under one vehicle, and exposure through their ownership in E2 Metals.
As part of the deal, because I think you said 19.9%, so just shy of 20% of E2 Metals, do they get a seat at the board? Are they going to have much to do with the future direction of E2 Metals?
Yeah, so Austral will be electing one nominee to the board. Obviously, that will happen on closing of the transaction, and we think that's fair and equitable for a large shareholder of that scale. And they've got a lot of knowledge operating in Argentina and Latin America in general. And really, I look forward to sort of working with them and having their sort of strategic input into the direction of the combined portfolio moving forward.
The deal will be finished, if you like, at the end of January. What's the news going forward? In other words, what are you going to do? What's next? Like the deal's done. It's, as you said, it's given you a clear pathway to development, is what you said. Talk us through what that clear pathway looks like.
Yeah, look, we hold the belief that in a province like Santa Cruz, where you've got a clear regulatory framework, you've got a really easy permitting framework. We feel that sort of 90 million ounces silver equivalent is a sort of robust starting point for a standalone develop in a province like Santa Cruz. Now, this transaction will bring in 50 million ounces at a cost of 20 cents up front, obviously 10 cents deferred. In terms of future growth, so from 50 million ounces to 90 million ounces, it's clear to point out that we do have a maiden resource for Conserrat coming out in Q1 next year, which will obviously add a lot of growth to that resource base. We've been drilling down there for 2 seasons. We've made a number of high-grade discoveries, so those discoveries will not go unnoticed in the way of contributing to the global resources. And then on top of that, there's a lot of opportunities for short-term resource growth. At Pinguino alone, there are 6 mineralised vein structures that fall outside of the current resources, which we plan to follow up with drilling and hopefully bring into the resources. We've got a number of veins which sit in the inferred category that will try and elevate into the indicated category. And there's also a number of vein structures where, mineralisation is completely open along strike and at depth. For example, at Marta Central, which is the main vein at Pinguino, which hosts, sort of 40% of the project's resources, there's only 2 or 3 holes below 130 vertical meters. There's one pierce point 400 vertical meters below the surface, and that drill hole intercepted mineralization over 10 to 12 meters. So, so the system's very much open. The current resources, 85% of the current resources sit at sort of surface to 130 vertical meters. So really there's a lot of scope for growth, obviously at Pinguino and also Conserrat.
You said earlier, Eric Sprott Cornerstone, that raise that you did, which was just over 8 million back in March. Has he had very much to do with this acquisition and any sort of involvement in it, or is he sort of sitting back? Because he was a cornerstone investor. He's got a considerable interest in that. He's not a silly man. He loves his precious metals. I'd like to just understand, what has he seen and how involved is he?
Yeah, look, I think when we first discussed the Conserrat opportunity to Eric Sprott and his team, because obviously there's a large group of analysts that sit behind Eric. So, we were quite clear that the opportunity is two-pronged in that there's clear exploration potential at Conserrat, but there's also a lot of opportunity for consolidation. And really what we've done today is consistent with that two-pronged approach. And look, we're here to grow. The best way to become a preeminent silver company is to have a lot of silver in the portfolio. And, what we see is, we've brought on more silver resources at a lower cost base than what we could if we were to drill for them ourselves, particularly in an inflationary and rising cost environment. So hopefully it gets the big tick from the big E.
The big tick from the big E. Well, speaking of rising costs and rising environment, the silver price has strengthened a bit just in the last few weeks. Are you seeing that might start to continue? Do you think this is the end of that silver being unloved for a little while?
Yeah, that's right. It's interesting, isn't it? Because inflation runs hot, silver and gold fall, inflation turns over and silver and gold start to run. So it's almost opposites week. And, I think we've all tried to formulate a thesis around why silver and gold will move. And, I'm under the belief that it will move for all the reasons that no one's expecting. But if we do look at, the sort of macro setup currently, I think what really we're seeing a number of headwinds, such as a hawkish Fed, rising rates, strong US dollar, China lockdowns, all these sort of structural headwinds to the economy. We're seeing those start to turn and become tailwinds. The falling US dollar is a really big tailwind to the precious metal industry and the precious metal price.
Yeah.
And, we just need to see, silver clear sort of $25 an ounce, and everyone thinks it's going to go to 30. And, we will see a great reset in the precious metal industry. And hopefully we'll start seeing a lot more retail investors come back into the space. And dare I add that, we've lost a bit of competition in the crypto space in the last few weeks, Kerry. I think the battle,
C word. Don't mention the C word.
the battle for the trust economy, I think, has been well and truly won by gold and silver, which obviously is a social contract that's outlasted many civilizations. So, and will outlast Sam Bankman-Fried.
Yeah, you couldn't make that up, could you? I call it
No.
Bankman Fried. Bankman Fried.
Yeah.
Fried.
That's
sorry,
exactly
Stan,
right.
but you are. Just going back to what's going to happen in 2023, it is a transformational transaction for E2 Metals. You're going to have somebody from Austral Gold on your board. What are you going to do with the money going forward? I guess what I'm trying to get to is the value. The market has started to have a look again at E2. It was a little bit quiet there for a while. I've seen that your share price has risen by about 20% on the news of this transaction, which is good. But I want to see, where's the value add going forward, do you think?
Sure. Well, in terms of making really big forward-looking statements, our vision is clear. We need to grow this to a sort of circa 90 million ounce silver equivalent development company. And, we're obviously going to do that through this acquisition of Pinguino, through a maiden resource at Conserrat, and through further resource and exploration drilling on both projects. So that's the vision and that's the mission. That's how we're going to get there. Come next year, we should obviously tick off sort of the consolidation of the two projects. Our goal is to get obviously the foreign resources which have been calculated for the Pinguino project, get those converted into JORC, which is critical obviously for us being on the ASX. Then obviously we'll get out the Conserrat maiden resource, and then we'll sort of hopefully put forward a roadmap in terms of where the next generation of resource growth is coming from. As I said, we've got a lot of drill targets between the two projects. Before we closed up exploration at Conserrat last season, we promoted some really nice drill results from a number of prospects where mineralisation is still open at depth and along strike, a number of high-grade vein targets which haven't been drilled at all, which were just discovered by mapping and sampling. So yeah, that's really that's the value proposition for us. If we can get to that critical mass for development, and also do that in a rising silver market where projects like ours do get re-rated to sort of, let's call it $2, $3, $4 per ounce in the ground, that's where the shareholders in E2 are going to see the most talk.
Going back, if I can, to the two projects and bringing them together. They're 15 kilometers apart. Are you going to have the same team working on them? You're going to be drilling one and then the other. How are you going to manage that, if you like, bringing them together, I guess?
Yeah, I think it's appropriate to sort of point out that, the Cerro Negro project, which is a world-class vein field in the western part of Santa Cruz, the Cerro Negro project is actually comprised of two separate vein fields. One's the Eureka West vein field, and then there's the sort of Bajo Negro or vein zone vein field, and those two are quite separate, and to the point where there is quite a distance between the two vein fields. So I guess really what I'm saying is this isn't a hub and spoke type model. It's just a normal project for the Santa Cruz province and the Desierto Massif geological province. And essentially what we've done is probably combine two projects that should be under one company. And really, we're going to be doing that by linking the two. Obviously, there's infrastructure between the two projects. There's roads between the two projects. One great part about this transaction is that Austral Gold and the Pinguino project, the transaction of the Pinguino project includes the underlying farming land at Pinguino. So we now own all the surface rights, which means we have no counterparties with respect to access and development. We also have a winterized camp, so the El Tranquilo camp, which, the replacement cost of that would be about $1.5 million US. And so the plan is to start basing ourselves out of the El Tranquilo camp. And, really the idea is just to look at each project on their merit. The best targets rise to the top. The best targets get drilled first. And it doesn't matter if it's in Pinguino or Conserrat. Really, all we're focused on is how many meters go in and how many ounces come out. And that's it.
It would be remiss of me not to just ask this question, which is Argentina as a jurisdiction, for those people that are listening that might say, what's Argentina like to work in? Any hurdles that you have to jump over? Is the government supportive of mining? And, do you have the lease? You've mentioned that you've got some title, etc., but are there any hurdles that you need to jump over, or are they very supportive?
Yeah, look, I think so the Santa Cruz province is, I think really it's the Carlin trend of Latin America in that, it's really easy to get in there and do things like permit heap leach pads. And, there's a very clear and workable framework for permitting and building mines. And, obviously that scale that varies from really large long life mines to quite small small scale operations. And so Santa Cruz has it all. So I've got 100% confidence that should we develop a project of scale, it will be built. Now, obviously with Argentina, the issue at the moment and the cloud hanging over the country is the fiscal stability, the tax regime. And, really there's 7 billion reasons why we hope that will be fixed in the form of the underdeveloped copper potential in Argentina, specifically the northwestern part of Argentina. And, it's really important to highlight some of the success that's been had with some of the TSX explorers, like, for example, Filo Mining, which had, BHP come in and invest over $100 million for a very small slice of, a $2 billion pie. Wow. In a discovery they've made up in the northwestern part of Argentina. So there's a huge the copper story in Argentina is growing. All the big names are there. Argentina's become the new Ecuador in that all the majors are sort of flocking to Argentina. And we think it's a matter of time before they can, they resolve some of their fiscal issues and their tax and regulatory issues, because they need to create a pathway for these major developments. And if that happens, then we're going to be in a very good position. But it's also worth noting that just recently, Pan American Silver, which is an Argentinian mining company, they're a global silver company with operations in Argentina. They've recently teamed up to acquire Yamana. Now, Yamana's sort of flagship assets that Pan American are interested in, one is Cerro Moro in Santa Cruz. And if you look at the sort of price that Pan American paid for that portfolio, it puts a value on Cerro Moro at around sort of $780 million. And it really provides like a really clear terminal end valuation for a company like us, in that, I guess really what I'm saying is, despite the challenges, mining companies are there. And if they want to remain mining companies, they have to acquire. And it's far easier to acquire assets in your own backyard than move into new jurisdictions.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, the current market cap of E2 Metals, it's what, 45 mil?
Based on today's price and considering the pro forma share capital. So I guess what I'm saying is assuming that we do issue 50 million shares to Austral Gold, the market capitalization is sort of circa 45 million, yes.
So not so it's really not if you look at that, it doesn't really value this new your current market cap doesn't really take into account this new acquisition.
Yeah, I think the look through on the transaction, like a really simple look through, is that there's really two preeminent silver development companies on the ASX. The first is Silver Mines, and the second is Investigator Resources. Yep. After this transaction, the Pinguino resource is of a very similar scale to Investigator. So, if all we had was the Pinguino project alone, we know that we sit up there in the top three. But we know that obviously we've got resource growth coming with the Conserrat maiden resource. So, naturally we sit somewhere between Silver Mines and Investigator in terms of total ounces, and the market capitalizations of those two companies are sort of $200 to $70 million. So, look, we still think that there's a lot of opportunity to re-rate even at these prices.
Well, it's good to get you back onto small caps again, Todd, and congratulations on this transaction. I think quietly you've been quite busy behind the scenes, quietly making sure this happens. So it's exciting to see the growth, because you always said it was there. We're running out of time, so I want to ask you this, Todd. It's my usual one. 3 reasons. Excuse me, losing my voice. Why people should be sitting up and taking notice of E2 Metals right now.
Yeah, so I guess number one is obviously we finally have when I say finally, we've moved into a new classification of explorer. I think we can now sit there and say we're on the pathway to being a preeminent silver developer on the ASX. So that's number one. Number two is we've got a large resource base with clear levers for further growth, with the Conserrat maiden resource coming, and also opportunities to expand those resources in the first half of next year. And third, finally, it looks like we've got some reprieve and the silver price is ready to go on a bit of a run. So I think the confluence of those 3 factors, obviously de-risking the company, becoming a real company, having resources and growing those resources in a higher silver market, is a great combination.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen. Right time, right place, great jurisdiction. And Todd is out there making sure to get the right acquisition at the right time in a rising silver market. The ASX code, as I said at the beginning, is E2 Metals. Please, as always, do your own research. But if you want to talk to the man himself, just give E2 Metals a call, and I'm sure he can give you his own update too. Thanks so much, Todd. Great to have you on Small Caps, and let's talk again in the new year when that maiden resource comes out.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks, Kerry.